What up, everybody? Man, I'm happy that y'all found time today to tune in. Jay Klein, for those of y'all that don't know me, if this is your first time coming across the podcast, appreciate you. Today, we're going to be introing what vulnerable is and also, talking about a topic that I feel is near and dear to everybody's heart. Vulnerable, by definition, it means being in a position where someone could hurt you physically or emotionally. And traditionally, I feel like when people think about being vulnerable, they're really apprehensive because most of the time, I think vulnerability symbolizes hurt. By definition alone, we just said that it's something that puts you at risk to be hurt. And I think hurt shapes us in many ways, right? Pain does a lot of things, right? And I feel like the number one thing that it does is it lies to us. Pain oftentimes it gives us this notion that we'll be hurt again in the same exact way that we experienced it before. That we're going to experience that same level of disappointment, that we invest all this time into becoming this version of who we think we should be, only to receive nothing in return. It causes us to become guarded. It causes us to be resentful, detached, emotionless, and really withholding emotions from ourselves and others. It prohibits us from connecting. And so my hope, with everybody coming to Vulnerable is to see me talk about the same topics that we discuss, in our friend groups and various communities that we see all over, the media or just around the world. But my approach and my hope is to present a level of vulnerability, right? To be layered in my approach and to really dive into that. I want to peel back who I am and reveal things that I've went through personally in my life and see how that can really integrate into sections of your life. I believe that all of our lives are intersections, and where I'm at in my life may be, crossing a path of yours, vice versa. And so I'm hoping to just lead the conversation. By no means am I presenting myself as an expert. By no means am I looking to be the person who has all the answers. But I would love to get the conversation started. And I feel like there's so much power in being vulnerable. And so, that's just a bit of background on where my passion and my heart lies with this thing. And I truly believe that it's something that we can all connect with because there is a lot of stigma with being vulnerable, right? Vulnerability symbolizes that you're weak, that you'll be taken advantage of, you're emotional, and it also, I think, represents a layer of secrecy that we develop a fear that people will reveal a component of us that we're not yet ready for the world to know. And I can tell you that I've encountered that many times in my life, right? I think especially as a male, there's a stigma with being vulnerable to where we're supposed to be these hardened individuals and we're supposed to be the kind of person that conceals everything. But in reality, that's not the case. Vulnerability is something that opens the door for others. When we look at, all the people that have symbolized change in society, you talk about your Nelson Mandelas or your Martin Luther King Jr.'s or, even your Tupacs. There was a layer of vulnerability to them that others connected with because they were saying, hey, here's where I am right now. And even in my development, here's where I believe we should be. And these are ideals and customs that I'm presenting to other people. And I feel like this is a path that we should take. And I'm inviting y'all to come along that journey, and I feel like that's what vulnerability does. I think there's a misconception with vulnerability where people associate it with being transparent, right? When people are saying that they're a transparent person, I think we automatically assume that's a vulnerable person, but transparency is not vulnerability. Transparency is just honesty, right? Here's an example of transparency. I'm a black man, right? That's me being honest. It's very visible. Vulnerability is this. I'm a black man who's struggling with my self-esteem. You know what I mean? It's peeling back the layer, going a bit deeper. I was talking with a friend of mine and he gave a great visual. He's like, transparency is like, hey, this is where I live. But vulnerability is like, oh, come inside and see. This is my living room. This is my master bedroom. This is my backyard, right? It's bringing people through components of your life that expose them to what makes up you as an individual. And I feel like that's something that, especially in our generation, we struggle with. I think that we champion all these quotes and we, talk about a lot of different things that look good to the public eye, but even those things are manufactured. When we look at people who come out and share stories about, going through certain types of abuse and, various things that they've had to be liberated from, and we watch these things on documentaries, you always see them go into a component of how difficult of a struggle it was for them, right? I was recently watching a documentary with my wife, and when the lady was sharing that her story was always real to her, but it took the public time to catch up with that. And so I feel like that's what you run the risk of with being vulnerable, is you may not get an immediate return on investment, but it is a worthy investment. All of that to say, I really think it's connected with my topic today, which is purpose. And I think, in order for us to discover purpose, we have to already be comfortable with being vulnerable. Something I've always cared about is people, specifically people who have been overlooked, people who lack a voice, people who, have lived in shame, maybe guilt. My hope was to liberate them, to free them. And oftentimes when I say free them, I'm referring to freeing them from themselves, whatever lies that we feel bound to, whatever things that we feel like, man, this thing has really got me apprehended, or this is prohibiting me from being vulnerable, right? Or this is prohibiting me from reaching my purpose. It's what led me to write my book. What is your purpose is what it's titled. But in this journey of me writing this book, man, it was actually something that I was really apprehensive to do, because I didn't want to position myself as an expert about something, because I feel like the whole world is always talking about purpose. Like, oh, I got to find my purpose. I'm doing such and such. And we make it out to be this, this spot on the map, right? This place that we'll once travel to. And, I feel like in order for me to properly articulate that, I truly needed to make sure that I was bringing a layer of vulnerability about who I was, what I had experienced, but also at the same time, I was apprehensive because I didn't think anybody was going to listen to me, right? For people who already know me, I felt like I had already been prejudged for my mistakes. For people who didn't know me, I felt like there was a perception of who they thought that I might be. I was ashamed of every failed relationship I had been in. Anytime that I thought about it, I felt like, man, I would never be a valuable source for people to listen to, right? Like, there's a lot of things that I experienced in life that I allowed the stigma of those things to hold me back, right? Being a teen father, dating a lot of women, using women, manipulating people, stealing, right? Lying, cheating, hanging out with people who I thought represented, a certain level of status, and really perpetrating a version of myself that truly wasn't me. And so I felt like for me to now position myself as an author and to talk about something so pertinent as purpose, I didn't think anyone would listen to me, right? I felt like surely they're not going to pick this book up. And more importantly, I thought, like, how do you even write a book? I've always been a writer. I've always been intrigued by various things in journaling, but I figured, how could I position myself to speak about a topic that I haven't even come to the proper conclusion on? And so as I went through that journey, it really challenged me to get real, nitty gritty, if you will, and make sure that everything that I wrote about was something that I could truly speak to, that I had lived, whether that had been failure or whether that had been conquering it. And so, of course, I think y'all should get the book. That's not the whole purpose of me bringing this up. But it is to just say, there were so many moments of vulnerability that I experienced even in that journey of trying to position myself as a voice on purpose, or the topic of purpose, if you will. And I didn't feel that I could do that confidently. I mean, full transparency, full vulnerability, I should say. After I had published the book and celebrated all of these achievements, I couldn't even afford to buy the book. And, I share that not for a pity party, but because that's how real it was for me as a journey. That was just another thing that was a discouragement. It's like, I'm literally telling people, here it is, I wrote a book, go and get it, and I can't afford to buy it myself. My wife and I, we were going through one of the hardest financial seasons we had ever encountered. And now I'm talking to you from the other side of that, but it was difficult. I felt like all of these things really stifled me from being able to say like, oh, I could still speak about this topic. I felt that I had to be, like I mentioned before, an expert or somebody who had already successfully conquered this thing before talking about it. And that's not what true vulnerability is. And so all of that to say, I had to decide to start where I was, which I did. I started to notice that everywhere I looked, right, people were wrestling with the same thing. They were talking about purpose, or everywhere that I was kind of coming up in discussion, people were saying things like, man, I'm trying to find my purpose. And those things were encouraging for me because I felt like, okay, now I could truly talk about this. Now I can actually position myself because I'm hearing people speak about this thing, and obviously somebody got to start the discussion. And I remembered a couple years prior, before I had even started writing my book, I was teaching at a high school a workshop. And when I was teaching that workshop, I discovered 5 pillars of purpose: self-worth, influence, courage, identity, and legacy. And I remember when I was teaching the kids about it, I was like, man, this is going to be content one day. This is going to be something that I actually have to dive more into. And so as I started to write the book, I came up with a curriculum originally. But then I started to write about this from a lived experience, and I just realized, man, if I don't have great self-worth or self-esteem, I'm easily influenced. And when we look at the world, that's so true. These things are intertwined. If you're not aware of who you are as an individual and you lack self-esteem or self-value, you're influenced in any direction, right? You begin to adopt habits and attributes that are not truly authentic to who you are as an individual because of what you think is going to bring you notoriety, what you think is going to bring you, proper recognition, what you think is going to position you as, an expert or somebody who is admired, right? And somebody that is easily influenced definitely lacks courage. And I would equate courage to the word integrity, right? If you're a person who's easily influenced, you have no integrity. You lack courage. And when we look at any person that's ever inspired us in life, more times than none, they were a minority in their thought. And when I say minority in their thought, I mean they were the only person who was looking to take a stance on that particular issue. And if you're going to be a person that is fulfilling purpose, you certainly have to be somebody who is courageous, right? And if you lack courage, you definitely don't know how to identify, right? You begin to put all these versions of yourself out there that have no evolution. They're just manufactured components of who you think you need to be. And lastly, I would say that if you're a person that has no identity, you definitely leave a poor legacy. And we would attribute legacy to reputation, right? So think about a person that you don't really trust. I can guarantee you that every single pillar that I just mentioned, in one way or another, they don't possess those attributes. And so when we think of legacy or reputation, it's so important, right? I used to hear this term from my mentor all the time. He would say, man, your reputation precedes you, meaning that it goes before you. Before people meet you, most of the time they've already heard about you, right? If you're being introduced in a circle where you're around different friends, or maybe like say I'm, friend A, I'm now introduced into friend B. I already know their reputation, and I've probably 9 times out of 10 let friend B know about friend A. And so when we think about it as humans, as people looking to, continue to connect in various communities, we're always going to bring a reputation with us, or we're always going to be formulating that reputation. And these things are so closely connected to our purpose, right? Purpose, like I mentioned before, we make it out to be this achievable goal, right? Like, oh, I'm one day going to reach my purpose. Or we make it this groundbreaking discovery where we're like, oh man, you know what? I always knew I needed to be an attorney, and then I became an attorney, and I discovered my purpose, and I was able to do X, Y, and Z. I won all these cases. I went here. I won these awards. And in no way is that purpose. Those are achievements. And we shouldn't limit purpose to one definable, tangible thing, right? Purpose is tangible for us all, but it is not something that's that small in scope. Purpose is a culmination of things, right? described best by attributes. Three attributes that stick out to me would be obedience, discipline, and passion, right? These are all descriptors of purpose, because purpose is a lived thing. It's continuous. It's an action, right? It's formulated by all we aspire to be. And when we associate purpose with roles, it's really limiting, right? And I think the thing that can be misleading is when we think of purpose, let's pick a role, say fatherhood or motherhood. A lot of the times it could really feel fulfilling, and we think that that is our purpose because it contains attributes of purpose, right? Think about being a parent. In order to be a parent, you definitely have to be disciplined, and you for sure need to be passionate about your children. And because I'm feeling these things and I'm actively engaged in these skills and qualities every day, I can begin to communicate to myself, oh, this is what I'm destined to do. And we have to realize that purpose, it evolves, right? It changes in various seasons. So in this season, I'm probably accomplishing X, Y, and Z. But then there comes a period of my life where I have to pivot. I have to transition. And so, going back to those pillars of purpose, if you are doing your best to make sure that you're aware of your self-worth and where your influence is coming from, and managing your integrity, and keeping your identity in check, and managing your reputation, then at all times you'll really be closely in tune with where purpose is leading you. And so when I think of all of these characteristics, it really leads me to position a conversation to say, don't limit your purpose to a task, right? We were all, and this quote is in my book, but I want to share it with y'all right now. We were exclusively made to be inclusive. I'm going to say it one more time. We were exclusively made to be inclusive, which means you were designed on purpose, intentionally, to include others along your journey. And purpose is not something that you could solely achieve on your own. You have to have camaraderie along the journey. You have to invite others along the way. You have to be willing to say, okay, you know what? I need this person's perspective. Okay, I need this person's, particular insight. I need to adopt this new perspective. I need to challenge my own internal compass. And so when we think about vulnerability, it's synonymous with purpose, right? And one thing that came to my mind is the enemy of purpose, in my personal opinion, is vulnerability. Because if you're not a person who's willing to be vulnerable, you will never fulfill purpose. And so we have to always make sure that those things are, consistent with each other, right? And position ourselves in a way that is saying, okay, you know what? I hope my vulnerability leads me here. Or you know what? I don't know. And being comfortable saying I don't know, and then living life with that perspective. Even if people come along the way and they're, positioning your insight, or they're looking to put you before them on a certain topic, you have to be comfortable enough to say, I really don't know. So I'm just looking to start the conversation. I definitely believe the purpose of this particular subject will continue. I don't think this will be my first time talking about purpose. And I want to hear more from y'all, right? If there's topics you guys want to talk about, let me know. If there are things that you're curious or intrigued to discuss, I would absolutely love to have you on as a guest. And obviously we would talk off script and make sure that we're aligned on the vision, but really want to have more people come on the platform. I'm excited to show you all the guests that we do have prepared. Man, we got some great topics that we're chatting about, but let me know topics that are interesting to you guys. They could be, frequently discussed topics. It could be, topics that have never been visited before. If you want to know more about just my take or perspective on something, feel free to ask. Or if there's parts of my journey along the way that you're curious to know about, don't hesitate asking. I'm looking to give my book to people too as well. So I'm going to be giving 5 copies away. So continue to share this video. DM me if you can, or send emails to the link below. And I'll be reading through everything that you guys are sharing and picking 5 people to send this book to. Because I really feel like when we think about purpose, it is something that we need a constant reminder of. And it's something that can feel unnerving. It can really be a journey that feels lonesome. It can really be a journey that makes you feel as though, like, am I making the right decision? And I don't think you ever look up and say, oh, I'm living in my purpose. I think you look up one day and you say, like, oh, okay, all right, this worked out. And so along the journey, man, remember to be vulnerable. I'm super excited to share this platform with y'all. Thank y'all for y'all time today. Appreciate it. Peace.